Started. It's after 11.
Okay.
So I'll just say hi and introduce myself. I'm Carlin Benson. I'm the exhibitions director at Woodstock Birdcliff Guild. And the Woodstock Birdcliff Guild provides a vibrant center for arts and crafts in the beautiful community of Woodstock, New York. We are also preserving the historic and natural environment of one of the earliest utopian arts colonies in America. We offer a combination of residency, educational, exhibition, and performance programs that encourage creative collaboration among a diverse array of artists, and also students, arts professionals, and the public. Now you can access our programming virtually through our website, woodstockguild.org, weekly emails, and our various social media outlets. So thank you so much to our Artists in Residence Program Manager, James Adelman, and Assistant Program Manager, Erica Kari McCarthy, who have joined us today from the Birdcliff Colony. Yeah, we'll be discussing what's happening right now at Birdcliff this spring, and also since they're both artists, I thought this would be a great opportunity for them to show us their work since they have some of their work with them right now. So they can give us a little studio visit. So we're also gonna have time for questions. So at the end, we're gonna, if you have any questions, you can, if you think of them, you can write them up in the comments section on Instagram, and I'll take note of them. And you could also wait till the end if you want, and we'll have a question and answer session. So please feel free to, and join us and make this a lively conversation. So I'm going to introduce James. James Adelman started overseeing the Birdcliff Artist Residency Program in 2018. He developed an affinity for the colony over 3 consecutive summers as a visual artist in residence. He has over 10 years experience in New York City's galleries and auction houses, and has worked for artists such as Mark Tansey, Inka Essenhai, and Margaret Bolland. James's artwork has been exhibited extensively in solo and group shows across the US and abroad, and he has received a wide range of press and awards. In addition to Birdcliff, he has attended numerous residencies, both domestically and internationally. James received a BFA from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and he went on to attend Cranbrook Academy of Art before completing an MFA at the New York Academy of Art in 2014.
Thanks.
And yeah, I hope I didn't go too fast. Erica Kari McCarthy is an interdisciplinary artist and assistant manager of the Birdcliff Artist Residency Program, where she has worked since 2017. Her artwork merges elements of sculpture, installation, and photography, and she's exhibited nationally in venues such as the Cameron Museum of Art, Crosstown Arts Center, and Rochester Contemporary Arts Center. McCarthy's work has been published in print media and was the featured artwork on a 2019 album by Talk Ensemble. She received a BFA in Studio Fine Arts from the Rochester Institute of Technology. So welcome, James and Erica. And I'm gonna just start this conversation by asking how you're doing and how you've been over the past few months with dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic.
I think we've been doing pretty well, all things considered. Like everybody, this is a pretty kooky time and a lot to get used to, but thankfully for us right now, we're surrounded by the woods and nature and have a fair amount of room to move around. I like to run, so I've been taking a lot of time recently to get outdoors, either for walks or runs, and that's been like my coping mechanism to not go stir crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it may not have been dramatically different for me in a way because I work remotely during the winter. We're a seasonal residency. Most of the buildings aren't winterized. So our season's about primarily 6 months, except a few year-round buildings. And so I was sort of working from home, and I was watching people go through this adjustment of, oh, it's strange to be in my living room. And I was sort of like, par for the course,
Yeah, we like to joke that quarantine is just, in some ways, an artist's natural state of being because a lot of us like to work either in isolation or like it just tends to go that way because our work is so internal.
I think like everybody, the uncertainty was very affecting though, and kind of froze me creatively for a time, and just not knowing, would we be able to run in the summer? What would that look like? What's going to be different? Is the work and the planning we did in the winter is that going to be relevant? Are we going to have to like rethink it all together? And there's a couple months of that kind of floating, February, March, April, and but by May we had kind of hammered out a plan, and now we're just
Right.
through it.
Could you tell us more about what's going on now, since you are fortunate to have some residents there, and like how did that come about?
We're really fortunate because we have sort of 3 tiers of our residency. There's a handful of year-round buildings where residents stay ongoingly, and then we have a 5-month program. We have 8 buildings where artists come from May 1st through the end of September. And then we have our monthly program, which is the largest, which hosts about 18 to 22 artists. But that takes place in 2 large communal buildings. And so we ran into the same problems that a lot of dormitories and things had, of people sharing bathrooms and kitchens and just being in 2 tight quarters. So we've had to, for the first half of the summer, our first 2 sessions, we've had to postpone or defer those 2. And we're hopeful about the second half of the summer, but we won't do anything unless it's safe. And but we have those annual buildings already had people in them, and the seasonal buildings are sort of tucked around in the forest, and everybody has their own autonomous cottage. So we're really lucky. A lot of residencies don't have that luxury. And so we're hosting about 20 artists right now on campus, and everybody had to come in and do their 2-week quarantine. So did we. We just stayed in separate buildings. And did our 2-week quarantines, and so did all of the incoming residents new to the Ulster County area. So we haven't had them. I'm sorry. Go.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah, we have a small number of residents now. That small number in the private cabins. So right now we have our somewhat normal residency program, but it's scaled down to just those private buildings because we don't have any of the shared spaces open, just because of pandemic worries.
Right. Well, yeah, it's interesting. It's very fortunate that you can have people here at all. And then it sounds like you 2 also had to go through a quarantine, and also I know that there are some still precautions up at the colony, like everyone has to wear masks when they're outdoors. Of course, you're indoors, but yeah. So it's it's a whole new normal up there, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you really have to shift all of your interactions, and we've had to rethink a lot of our own programming and just what our expectations are. Normally, especially the monthly program, we welcome everybody with a giant home-cooked meal. Yeah, we cook like a massive thing of chili. James has an amazing sweet potato chili. Yeah. So
Nice.
we normally cook up a giant dinner for everybody. And I think that's kind of a staple of the residency to some extent, of the shared food and potlucks. And obviously that's something we've had to totally rethink and somewhat nix out of the program right now. But interactions are still happening from a distance. So yeah, when people are out, we're asking them to wear masks, and everybody's been really understanding of that and keeping that 6 to 10 feet distance. Again, thankfully we're in the woods and we have a lot of room to spread out. So there aren't those tight quarters where we have to be really worried about people coming into close contact.
Right.
But we've had to rethink things, but there's still those ways to get around it.
And it's one of the challenges with programming right now, and we're able to focus more on the seasonal program, which is terrific. It's how do you bring people together? How do we allow people that are sort of out in this, not isolated because we're so close to Woodstock, but there's barriers to being in town, and just how do you introduce artists to one another who may have come from different areas or different backgrounds and don't have an awareness of each other's practice in the separate buildings? So how do you introduce both their work and the people to one another without gathering people all together? So sort of in lieu of the welcome dinner, we had a little icebreaker and walked in a long, single file line through the campus, and we're able to tell people about the history and just at least acclimate them to what we have on offer, right as people came out of quarantine. And then Memorial Day, we had a lovely croquet match on the lawn.
Which is a great social distancing game if anybody's interested, because everybody has their own mallet and whatnot and can keep that distance. So if anybody's looking for an activity that's socially distant, that's a good one.
I think you need to share some photos of that with us later. That sounds pretty fun.
Yeah, we had a lot.
Cool.
And, you know, the right amount of turnout, and I was happy to see both seasonal and annual programs represented at the same time. It was great to see
Hmm.
that kind of cross pollination already starting to happen. And we're sort
Hmm.
of like, hey, if we're all here in this nice little utopia together, then let's
Hmm.
make sure we all know our neighbors and you know can engage creatively. We've done a little bit of outdoor critiquing, yeah, having people bring
Hmm.
their you know work to the outside. And that's been kind of one on one. Just you know, we haven't done it as a group yet,
Hmm.
but we hope to as things progress and we just find out what more and more is possible. Right now, we're kind of like, okay, let's start as cautious and small scale as possible, and like build out to you know without make sure we don't overstep the line. You know, let's
Right.
see it from the safe side of it.
Yeah, we've been
Right.
proceeding with an abundance of caution. So there's a lot of things where we're like, I know this might seem like overkill, but obviously
Mm.
our biggest concern is for everybody's health and well-being. And
Right.
so far, I think we've been able to really maintain that, and people have been working with us, which is key.
That's great.
And when we say everyone, we're thinking about, of course, the local community. You know, Woodstock has a thriving creative population as well, and so we're hoping to contribute to that always. And so that's kind of a paramount concern is if people are coming from different areas, how do we safely bring them to this area without threatening anyone else's well-being?
Right. So I have a question about the residents who couldn't attend. Are they being moved to another month? Like, are they moved to next year?
Yeah, we're really committed to supporting the artists that you know we you know selected, and you know they went through an intense jurying process and all of this kind of stuff. So the people who were offered attendance, we're really committed to allowing them to participate either in the imminent or more distant future. So they have you know choices to either you know they can withdraw. For some people, they've come back and said, hey, this is crazy, and I don't know where my life's going to be next year. So you know appreciate it, but I'm going to bow out.
Hmm.
Which is totally welcome. But then also people can be added to wait lists for later in the summer if the timing works for them, or just to defer to next year and attend the same, you know, session and timing the following summer.
The biggest factor in question is just time. We are committed to hosting these residents. We just, like everybody else, don't really know how the time will progress and where we'll be at in 2 months as far as the state of New York and what those regulations will be.
Yeah, it's an if not when. It's a when not if question for us.
Well, you've been handling it really well, and yeah, and it must feel really good to have some people there, and
oh yeah,
you know, to not be sitting empty.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah.
You know, for
yeah.
a moment it was you know well will it be safe for us to even go to the area and things like that. So we're ecstatic that we're here and to still be working with artists. I mean, it's what we love. It's what drew us here to the colony in the first place. So yeah, without the people, I don't know.
Yeah, that's great. Well, would you like to show us some of your artwork? Because I know you've been busy in other ways too.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And just a note on where we are and what's you know physically where we are right now. Eric and I, who usually stay in the largest communal building, Valletta, with you know that house is about 14 artists at a time. Right now, we're across the street in a building called the Forge, and it got its name from its function in the original colony in 1903. This was where all the metal work and jewelry and things were done, hinges and clasps for furniture. And so there's the history of that still here, and it's a building that has 2 bedrooms. I'm using one of them as a large live workspace, and so that's what I'll show you around in a second. But usually this building is used by couples or collaborative teams for a month at a time, and so that's connected to our monthly program, not our seasonal program. And so we've taken this over as sort of our base of operations. You know, we each have a room, and then we have enough space to set up an office, and it sometimes is important to have staff on campus for the middle of the night emergency or, you know, the rare thing that comes up, or also just to be a touchstone for people, hopefully to you know make them feel welcome. We have the advantage of knowing all these artists. They don't know each other yet, but so we like to just be a friendly face in the neighborhood and hopefully facilitate interaction. So that said, I'll show you around what is now my bedroom and my workspace.
I'm also getting comments of we missed the Forge, so there must be some former residents.
Yeah,
really
they're feeling a little homesick.
We never lived in it until now. At least I didn't. And I'm really enjoying it. It's a really sweet building.
Someone wrote the forge will always be with us.
Aw.
May the forge be with you.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
I've
funny.
stayed here once or twice in May as the seasonal residents arrive, but the communal residents haven't yet. Then I stay here usually for the month of May, and then everybody arrives in late May. The remainder arrive in late May. So I'm happy to be back. I love this building. So this is, well, I'll give you a quick little pan around of what this space is. This, like I said, is this is often the studio. If it's a couple, they'll share the bedroom and use this as the studio. But just for the sake of the geography, I don't know if you can see my bed there or not, but it's there in that corner. And I love living where I work because it's nice to wake up still in a half dream state and just jump right to the easel for me. So a little about my work is I do mostly oil paint and charcoal drawing. I'm pretty traditional in that way. And you mentioned I worked for an artist called Mark Tanzi, and he had a line that I thought was perfect. He said, I believe in the adequacy of the two-dimensional to represent the infinite. And so for me, people are like, well, why paint and charcoal? I'm like, well, it's where I started, and I've never found it. I've never been wanting for more. It's always been sufficient for me to do anything that I want, and it just still is overwhelming how much is possible for me. So these I'll show you are two paintings I'm working on now, and I have a close-up of one of these so you can get a better sense of where it's at. Although I don't see it here. So to just show you an example of finished work that I did here at Birdcliff, and then you can kind of maybe connect, but this is, I'm sorry, this is gonna not show up right either. Apologies, I didn't really test run the images, but there's an example of a finished charcoal drawing, and I'll show you the beginning of one over here.
That looks good. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, these aren't square images, so they're not loading the way I anticipated.
We can
But that's
still
all
see
right.
them.
Yeah, so that's you can have a sense of how do I bring that down, Erica?
You just hit this.
Okay, thank you. So that was an example of a finished one. Here's a started one on the easel. You can see a study in the upper left. My work mostly conceptually pertains to notions like about the subjective nature of human experience, and so these are sort of pictures that are in between emerging and dissolving. They're, you know, meant to be like a little comforting, a little spooky, things that are a little bit dualities happening. So it's a fine line between enough detail to recognize it and so much detail that your mind and your eye can't really wander through the image. So kind of riding that balance. I don't know, I could talk at great length about it all, but I might curtail there to give Erica a chance to also introduce her work.
Don't hold back on account of me.
Yeah, if you want to say a little bit more, we have time, but.
Well, and that notion, though, of these dualities and subjectiveness, like I think the Shakespeare quote that's well known is, you know, nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. I really believe in that. That's been my experience, that what's a great event for me could be awful for someone else. You know, attending a residency costs someone else theirs. It's happy and sad. You know, I'm overjoyed, but some part of me is like, oh, I wonder who didn't get to go now. And things like that I try to encapsulate in my work. In some of the earlier examples, this was a much more photorealist effort. I started to back away from that so that people could project more into the image. I try to stay in an area where it's obviously, unlike photorealism, I'm now in an area where it's like obviously handmade, but not entirely narrative what the actions were. You know, you wouldn't be able to trace my hand movements through it, but you can see them in it. So it's handmade, but not explicit what the hands were doing. And so there's a lot of levels of that. A lot of levels of kind of introducing something and then having its exact balance so that one doesn't overpower the other. Just these opposite things are coexisting. And then that also goes a little bit to reading about quantum physics and things existing in dual states. And so something could be exactly recognizable in what it is, but still abstract. And one of my favorite moments was watching a child and their parent debate one of my paintings during an open studios here about whether or not it was a picture of something. And the child kept insisting, no, there's a figure and there's a tree and blah, blah, blah. And the parent was like, no, sweetie, it's what's called abstract art. Like, there's no image there. If you see that, it's like looking at a cloud and blah, blah, blah. I just sort of came over and was like, you're both right, you know? But there's just a clue as to what I'm doing. And I'll bring you a little closer also to this image, because it's, I had this, but it wouldn't show up on screen. But this is in a, approaching a complete phase where it's, like I said, emerging and dissolving. So with that,
thank you.
Why don't we take a step outside to where Erica's been working on our beautiful porch.
I love how big that building is.
It is not small. And there's a lot of, this is not our largest. This is middle range.
Yeah, this is a great porch.
It's a good average size for what we have.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, and emerging and dissolving is actually a good segue for me to start talking about my work. I often call myself a sculptor, even though my work is pretty interdisciplinary. I use a variety of media, but I'm very focused on things like mass and physical presence, which are things that are really most relatable to the three-dimensional world. So I have a couple sculptures hanging here, but you might not be able to see them all just because they're fairly ghostly. They're mostly made out of copper wire and some other materials. And my process is very repetitive. It comes mostly from weaving just one piece of wire on top of another. This piece in the back here, this one, is woven from a plethora of water chestnuts that I've collected. If anybody here lives by the Hudson River, you might have stumbled upon them. If you step on them, they're really terrible, but if you pick them up as an artist, they're really beautiful. And so I've been collecting those and weaving them together in this very meditative, repetitive process of just one strand of copper wire on top of the other. This back one is still in progress, but right now it probably has at least 1,300 feet of wire. So it's a lot of small pieces building up into something larger, which is a really important part of it. The process itself is repetitive and relates back to ritual, as well as the coping mechanisms that come with repetitive motions, the processes of grieving and mourning, and just these labors of love that we partake in, even the emotional labor that it takes to maintain memories of the dead. And so this repetitive motion is really important in my work as I build up these kind of intricate structures. I swear, there's a sculpture here. You can't see it,
we can see it.
And it's very intricate.
I have a question. Some of your images I've seen, the work has been in nature, and I'm wondering how site-specific some of these pieces are, and what's your relationship to the outdoors and the placement of the sculptures.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that a bit. And of course, I'm out on the porch, which has been one of my favorite spots to work because I have the natural light and the natural tree forest backdrop. And the sculptures that I'm working with right now, I've been referring to them as a series of ghosts. And it's really the way that they interact with the environments that I place them into that their presence really shifts.
Oh, look at that. Wow.
That's what I needed.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I'm going to pull up just a couple photos of what one of these looks like in an environment. Oh, no. I swear I had some of these on my phone and they disappeared.
Oh, no.
Happened to me also.
Yeah.
Okay.
Technology.
Okay.
It's not just James.
I thought I just didn't have
If anybody got the email from Berkliff, there were photos in the emails. I don't know how many Berkliff newsletter subscribers we have on there, but they can go back to that email and see. And plus your website too, right?
Yeah, my website for sure. So
What's your, do you want to say your website just while we're here?
yeah, my website is erikakari.com. It's ERIKAKARI. Yeah, so the sculptures themselves meld into the environment, and the same sculpture can take up a variety of different identities when it's put into an environment and photographed, because the environment and how the light hits it, how it catches light in some ways and casts shadow in others, it really shifts the whole form and how its presence is. So yeah, definitely check those out if anybody can. And that's a pretty good synopsis of my work, I think.
Cool. What's on the board behind there? There's some images on there.
Yeah, there's some images here. Let me. James is my cameraman.
It's like maybe it's a little.
I mentioned I'm a sculptor, but I also do some painting and drawing. So these are a series that I've been working on for a little over a year now, and still not totally sure what they are, but they're illustrations of some sense. And I really just need the painting sometimes to do something a little more direct. The sculpture is so time consuming and labor intensive for me. Making a direct line on a piece of paper is really beneficial.
That's great.
A solid
so interesting to see the range of what you're doing.
Thanks.
Thank you. Cool. Well, do you have any more to say, or should we have some questions?
Oh, I always have more to say, but
oh yeah, and James, you should definitely give us your website too.
Sure, yeah. I'm Adelman, like my last name, ADELMAN, art, ART. So adelmanart.com.
Great.
Also understandingluck.com. Brings you to the same place though.
Oh really? Oh, that's cool. Good. So yeah, do you want to take some questions?
Yeah, I'm happy to take questions from you or audience or otherwise.
We had one question so far, but I hope others will ask questions. It's a great time, so type in your questions. The one question I noticed before was someone was asking when I kind of know the answers too, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. But when do you think Valletta will reopen? At what stage of this kind of process of reopening do you think Valletta will be usable again for artist residents?
We're hopeful that we'll be able to host people in August.
And let's also explain what Valletta is for those who don't know.
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. Valletta, we also like to say it's the mothership because it's our biggest building on campus. We normally have about 14 people living there. So it's kind of a dormitory style building. And that's where people in our monthly program, our monthly residents, will live there. And so we have not opened up Valletta yet for the season, simply because of the pandemic and worries about shared spaces. And so we're hopeful that in August we'll be able to, but we're still, keeping a finger on the pulse, watching the news and following the guidance of public officials as to whether that will be safe or not.
Yeah, and we have usually 4 sessions, kind of June, July, August, September. So June and July, we decided it's in everyone's best interest to postpone those. And we're making decisions about the other ones. We've said that we'll make decisions 30 days in advance of the start, which we hope will be enough time for people to still make plans and for us to prepare the building. Right now, it's still shut for the winter. So 30 days ahead of August, we'll decide if it seems feasible to run at full or partial capacity there. And then we have a smaller building across the street, which is beautiful, Eastover, and that houses another 5 artists. So it's possible that one or both may house a number of people, but for now we just have to wait, and that uncertainty's uncomfortable for ourselves, and I'm sure the artists that are holding their breath to know if they'll be traveling.
Yeah,
but it's
very
just
difficult.
It's necessary. It's too soon to call.
Yeah, I miss Valletta too. That's normally where I live, and right now we still have things wrapped up, so they're protected from mice and whatnot. So it's strange to see it right now with everything kind of still
kind of frozen in time a little bit. Yeah,
right, exactly. It's kind of like a time capsule.
But it's also, I'll say about that building, it's dormitory-esque in the second floor is kind of
rows of bedrooms with a couple bathrooms across the hall, but then our first floor is oh so much more with a big, huge living room and dining room. We can host the dinners. It's kind of our gathering point for grocery trips, events, visiting artists, everything like that.
Yeah, the Valletta porch is
Yeah.
probably still my favorite, as much as I
Mhm.
love this
I'd say it's the most occupied place on the colony. Is if you're ever starved for company, make your way to the
Mhm.
porch, and if no one's there, sit.
Yeah.
And they will come.
Yeah.
one.
Oh, that's sad, but
Yeah.
someday.
But it's all right.
We'll be
Yeah,
back.
it's sad, but we have many other porches and
Mhm.
many a bright time ahead. So
Totally.
yeah, fingers crossed. But we'll wait and see.
Yeah, that's all we can do. So I have a few questions about for the artists about your work. There's two for Erica. So since you're there in your studio, I'll ask. Somebody was asking about your working process with the wire and the weaving and stuff. Do you wear gloves when you're working?
No, if I was really protective of my hands, I would, because it can be kind of a painful process. But I'm very tactile,
Mm-hmm.
so I use a pair of pliers for the more finer work and to knot things and whatnot. But otherwise, my hands are my favorite tool and what I rely on.
Good to know. Yeah, it seems like you could have a lot of cuts doing that wire.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes more than others. I think
Yeah.
I've gotten better over time with just
Mhm.
like knowing how to react to the material, and like only every now and then do I stab myself.
Yeah,
It's all part of the process.
that's
right?
good. Yeah, you don't want to get hurt. Then the other question is another one for Erica about how large does your work get? Like when it's out indoors, it could almost get very large, you know.
Totally.
So just a question about that.
Yeah, I enjoy working large when I have the space. My size that I tend to gravitate to is like a small human size, say like
Mhm.
4'11", like an almost
Mhm.
grown adult. And I think that's something that I generally feel really comfortable with. I do
Mhm.
sometimes work a little larger. I had a piece at the Kleinert James Center that was probably more towards 7 feet, and that was really one of my larger pieces. But generally, when I am trying to make something outdoors, it needs to be large enough to have a presence when it's like up against a tree or backdropping
Right.
the field. So at that point, I think it has to be like a good
Mhm.
5-ish feet minimum. So
Yeah, you're probably a little bit limited by your studio too. If you can't make something 20 feet long if you're in a smaller space,
yeah.
right?
I made this smaller piece when like lockdown quarantine
Mhm.
first started, and I was just like in an 8x8 foot bedroom. It's like, all right, what can I do with a spool of wires? So
Mhm.
then I'm working more just like a 2 foot by 2 foot.
Right. That's
realm.
kind of cool. Yeah.
Having a massive porch means that I can work
Right.
a little larger, which is definitely a nice
Interesting.
luxury.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then for James, someone was asking about that image, and I was just about to ask the same question, so I'm glad someone asked. What was the story behind the dress in that image on the right? There was a woman's looked like an antique dress in your painting.
The one that was a painting, right? Not the black paper.
Yeah, the one that was the yellowish color, I think.
Yeah. What's the story with it? Well, I had been doing. I showed this charcoal drawing. I'll just show again briefly.
Oh yeah.
Which was of dresses in a window, and that was a lot of my work is a back and forth between painting, drawing, photography, and sometimes printmaking. But so a lot of people ask me if I work from photographs, and the answer is like sort of. I also photograph from drawings. So that drawing of the dresses I showed just now started with a little sketch. A lot of my work is imagination derived initially, starting with sort of a meditation based process to try and be in a trance state. And that's coming from an artist, Inka Essenhai, who I got to study under and work with later as a teaching assistant. She was one of my longtime heroes, and it's a process she introduced to me to be more emotionally driven than logic driven in selecting subjects, colors, and other things. And I'd say it's a back and forth between those. But so the story with that is I had done a sketch. It was sort of 3 rough dresses. That got turned into a little bit more detailed sketch, but then I was lacking for the detail I wanted to add. So I went out and sought a bunch of dresses in storefront windows throughout New York. I spend my winters in Brooklyn as of now. And so in seeking out dresses in storefront windows, I came across a number of other ones that weren't exactly for that drawing, but which had resonance for me. That one in particular more than any of the others. And that's not in the drawing, the photo that I'm using as the basis for that painting. But it was a photo that just independently, the image really resonated with me. The photograph didn't seem to carry what I experienced looking at it in person. And so that's why I opted to be in paint with that one. I sometimes recently have been exhibiting photographs. They used to always be at the service of other media, but now I'm getting to where I'm not really thinking about it as paintings, drawings, and photos. It's more just pictures. And that's another Mark Tansey notion, but just pictures, and they're just 2D images. And so to me, it doesn't matter as much all of a sudden whether it's a photograph, a drawing, or a painting. It's what imbues the feeling and mood that I want to transcribe, while also being in tune with the concepts that kind of overarch all of the work that I make. And so it's kind of concept, percept, and tactility, and so what the tactile medium is can fluctuate if the concept and the percept, if the visual and the conceptual are in alignment, then the tactility, and I try to align though also the tactilities in line with the concept. So without being convoluted, it's combination of those. And emotionally, I took that photograph around the time that my grandmother died, both of the images there actually, which was a few years ago. And I'm not sure why it resurged now, possibly because she was elderly, and I'm seeing a lot of people I care about who are older, wrestling with sickness or living with more fear than they had previously, than was previously warranted, perhaps. So I don't know. There's a little. I talked a little about the ideas. That's a little bit about the personal narrative. I'm not totally concerned that someone would be aware of the story behind it so much as that perhaps I could share the feeling and the emotion. And I think that human connection is one of the most important things to us as a species.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a very strong image.
Thank you.
So I have speaking of these kind of emotions, I have a good question that kind of segues into that. Someone asked how both of you are dealing with the COVID pandemic as artists. Is it helping your creativity because you have more time, or is it some people maybe can't work, they're too upset or they're too distracted? So how have you been able to focus during this time as an artist?
I'd say it has absolutely affected my ability to concentrate. Partly I was like, quarantine, awesome. I'm staying home for 2 weeks. Like, this is all I've ever wanted to do, is just stay home and have time to myself. And I did accomplish a fair amount in the hours after work, but I could not concentrate the way I usually do. Like, a lot of times I can hone in and stay trance state for, a few hours at a stretch without tremendous difficulty at this point, but it just wasn't there, and it shifted how I was working, because I'm progressing with these projects but much slower than is typical. And I found I've had to break it up with things that take less thought, which for me is returning to life drawing and self-portraits, and just legitimately my head is so swimming in ideas that it's like mirror, pencil, that's it for the next 3 hours. Like, I'm not really thinking about anything else. And I found that's really been peaceful and helped bring my mind back down to a navigable level.
Yeah, for me, I think as much as there's been more time to work, because I think all of us have a little extra time on our hands, not going out and whatnot, it's been a little more difficult to work. Like, especially I think when everything first hit and it set in, I had a really hard time sitting down and just making work, because it felt like it was too internal, like it was too much just me, like I was pretty much just left alone to my own thoughts. And my sculptures really feel a lot like they're just coming from my hands and my work. So I think during this time, I've been trying to do more research and reading and that sort of thing, because it's felt a lot more of a coping mechanism for me to be able to get more new ideas, because I'm kind of lacking that in my day to day, because I'm not
Right.
exposed to as much. I'm not seeing as many people, and like our daily interactions feel pretty limited, and that can be a good thing. Like it's nice to step back and be a little more purposeful with how your daily day-to-day happenings are.
Mm-hmm.
But I think reestablishing connections has been a big part of it for me, of kind of stepping back, doing more research, and trying to move forward in that sense.
Right. Well, yeah, both good answers. It'll be interesting to see what all the artists are doing during this time when we can look
Yeah,
back.
I'm really intrigued by that, because for some of it is a really big change, and for others, it's not that much. Some people are really used to working alone in their studios.
True.
But I think for everyone, there's still like this emotional nagging feeling. Like you can't separate the fact that you're like in this time of crisis, that
Right.
we're like living in a pandemic world. So I think we're all affected by that in
Definitely.
one way or another. But
Yes.
artists are amazing because they always find ways to adapt. Like I'm really amazed by everyone's like at-home studios, just like how you find ways to work in a 8x8 apartment and like all of those things, because generally the art doesn't stop no matter what's happening in the outside world. You're always drawn to create, and you'll make that happen no matter what.
Right. That's true.
Something that's been interesting to watch too, and it was one of our residents recently brought it up. I think it was Rachel Warner, but it might have been another. But she said, it's kind of like everybody's facing the same problem or the same puzzle, Suddenly there's like these parameters on what you can do, which might be restrictive of what you normally do. And how do you work within that? And, if so many of us are now suddenly working from home instead of a studio, and what do you make now, and how do you bring in what you were making before? Can you, do you? And so it's sort of a little bit like solving a puzzle, and everybody's solving the same puzzle differently. And so it's been really interesting watching what other people are doing on Instagram. There was a call to our alumni to share what their indoor studio practice was now, or what are you doing to keep creative now? Are you able to? And so we shared some of that on Instagram, people who responded to us. And I've seen a similar kind of thing going. I'm subscribed to an email list that's sending me, 2 artists a week. And Carlin, you're doing great work with your spotlighting artists too. And
yeah, it's just amazing to see the adaptability, I guess.
Yeah.
Everybody adapts to it in a different way, but everybody finds a way to adapt.
I think we just have time for one more question. Then one more just came in about, what does care for the Bergcliff community look like moving forward, opening the AIR program again?
That's a really good question.
What is care? Was that the question?
Yeah. What does care for the Bergcliff community look like moving forward? We did talk a little about opening again hopefully in the fall, but maybe, I feel like you kind of also just answered the part about supporting the community is showing work by alumni, but you can speak more about that, I guess. I know that there is a larger community besides just people who are physically there, so
Totally.
Maybe talk about that.
Well, yeah, and I think first and foremost, I think care comes down to not putting anybody in danger, and not just like looking after everybody's health and well-being. It is kind of hit me really hard when I realized that we all have a responsibility to just not cause anybody to be in a position where you could get sick. And so just like being really personally responsible about that. But from another angle, I think continuing outreach is another way that we're continuing to care for our community. I think this is one way that we care for our community.
Definitely.
Of like having virtual programming and still continuing to outreach. And I think that supporting other artists, that's like the crux of a community, is putting our own work out there, but making sure we're giving shout outs to other people too, so that their work is seen, and giving a platform in that sense for people to work and for their work to be seen.
That's a good answer. Sorry, James.
One thing that struck me there was they said, "What would it look like if we reopen?" And in my mind, we are open. We're just not running at full capacity. You know, we've got 50% of the artists we typically have on campus are already here, and I think care in this context, it does, like Erica said, it kind of means being careful, just being cautious. And I think that we're going at least to the required guidelines of what should be done to keep people from transmitting to one another. And I think more than flattening the curve here, what we're aiming for is zero transmission this summer. We don't want anyone to spread to anyone here this summer. And everything we can do to do that, very diligent 6 foot, very diligent masks, not risking programming. If it might be safe, we're not doing it. You know, if we believe it can be fully safe in terms of no one transmitting to another person, that's what safe means to me. Because, you know, that can be the spiral, you know, it can be 1 person to 5 people to more. If we just cut off that pipeline here now, then that's that many more cases, you know, the exponential spread slows. And later in the summer, I think, I don't know what it looks like. And that's just candid, you know, there's uncertainty everywhere.
Changing.
I don't know what my life looks like this winter. I don't know about next year plans that I had. And sort of our approach is like we're keeping updated on policies, trying to keep, you know, residents informed as much as we're able to any notable changes. And it's sort of not worth conceptualizing to me. Like right now, I'm thinking about June and what's going to happen then, because I have a clear enough picture to start making plans for June. But July and for August, I think that it's time better spent just focusing on here and now, another kind of refreshing thing of it, than planning for August when everything could change in July.
Right.
You know, so not investing as much time there because we have, I don't know, more immediate things. Like there's no shortage of things for us to pay attention to and focus on.
Right.
And of course we've thought about, you know, well, what does it mean, a shared kitchen, if we try to bring artists into that? What's that going to look like? And is that possible? And what would the restrictions have to be? And I can't help my mind and wandering through that. But I think conclusively, I really just try to shift my attention off of it because it's just too many unknowns to anticipate what'll be at that time. Right.
Well, that's a good answer. Thank you.
That's
Yeah,
all
we're going pretty long here, so I feel like we should probably say our goodbyes. And unless you have any more comments, James and Erica, but I thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to everyone. There have been some really nice comments. It's great to hear from people, and we'll be doing this again. We'll let you know when the next one is, hopefully in a couple weeks. And yeah, and thank you so much.
And before we go, I want to say if people do want to learn more about our program and applying and things like that, our deadlines are usually in December and February, and there's more information on the Birdcliff website, you know, so woodstockguild.org.
Yes.
Definitely check us out, and if you have questions, both Erica and I's contact information are available through there, so questions about the residency or our work, you know, feel free to check us out there or through our websites.
We're very
Definitely.
friendly people, obviously.
Yeah, we really
Yeah.
we love it already.
Yep. Well, thank you so much. And like you said, visit woodstockguild.org. You can visit us on Instagram, Facebook for the latest information. And our website also features items from the Birdcliff shop and information about becoming a member or supporter. So thank you again. Have a great day.
Carla, thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you for the series.
Bye. Yes. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks
Stay
for coming
safe.
in.